One of the greatest highlights of my Sundays when I grew up was watching Jungle Book on TV. And for those of you familiar with Captain America and Hulk, one of the earliest superheroes I was introduced to was Shaktimaan.
Shaktimaan, Shaktimaan,
I started the previous episode with a story about how a TV show, the Ramayan, captured the attention of millions of Indians. But how did televisions become so common in most Indian homes? What do children of today even make of television and television shows? Hi, you're listening to What's New Today, a podcast about current events shaping our world. This is your host Sangeeta from India, and joining me in this episode are
My name is Dhruv and I am 11 years old. I live in Bangalore.
Hi, my name is Pranshi. I study in grade 6 at SP Nutan Academy.
welcome Pranshi and Dhruv. This is part 5 of our podcast series on India's space journey, and I'm sure most of our listeners who've heard you before in parts 2 and 3 will be familiar with you, but still welcome back.
You all watch cartoons? What do you all watch on TV?
I watch YouTube.
Okay. Dhruv?
I watch Netflix.
Okay.
I used to watch Netflix, but it got disconnected. I don't know how.
Have you heard of Ramayan Mahabharat TV show?
Yes.
Yeah, I've watched them.
You watched the old Ramayan Mahabharat TV show?
Yeah, I've watched a part of it, the old one. I haven't watched it fully. My mother showed me a little bit.
Did you find it interesting?
Yeah, I watched the part until it was the most interesting part when my mother shut the TV. When the war started, that's when my mother put it off.
How did televisions become this common, right? Most of us have televisions in our houses. India's space journey has something to do with how televisions became this common. Again, as most stories about India's space journey go, this story also begins with Dr. Vikram Sarabhai. In the 1960s, even before India's first sounding rocket had taken off, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai was watching one event with very close attention. The United States had launched its own communication satellite. He also knew it was very, very expensive and India didn't have the money. So he decided that whenever it was that India launched its own satellite, it would do many things. It would do weather forecasting, it would also help us make phone calls, and it would be used for television broadcasting. Dr. Sarabhai had passed away in 1971, but our scientists at ISRO and Professor Satish Dhawan, who was the man who took over from Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, continued to work on this. We had by now reached the end of the 1970s, and the Prime Minister then was Indira Gandhi. Now, she got all excited about getting our satellite into space. And she was especially excited because the Asian Games were going to be held in the year 1982. And India was hosting the game. And Indira Gandhi wanted everyone to see the games on TV, not just any TV, but in full color. Now, till then, most homes only had a black and white television. Those days, you couldn't have just walked to the neighborhood store and picked up a TV or ordered anything on Amazon, of course. You needed a permit from the government to import a color television set. Indira Gandhi's government decided to open up the limits and she allowed nearly 50,000 color television sets to be imported. Indians went on a big color TV purchasing spree, and showrooms in Hong Kong and Singapore were emptied of their color television sets as most of them had gone into the homes of Indians. Everybody was getting ready to watch the Asian Games, which were to be held in November and December of 1982. Now, while all of this was happening, our ISRO space scientists were also working on putting the Insat 1A, which was the name of the satellite, that had to go up in space and broadcast the Asian Games. India still did not have the full capability to develop this satellite, so we had given money to a company in the United States called the Ford Aerospace Company. They were designing and developing the satellite for us, Insat 1A, and NASA was launching it for us. Indira Gandhi and her entire cabinet and all of ISRO was watching the launch very carefully. The launch happened in April 1982.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Liftoff was perfect. Insat 1A was ejected and went into orbit. But there was a small technical problem. A solar boom on the satellite, which is, think of it like a stick, did not function properly, as a result of which the Insat 1A was consuming a lot more power than it would have. So our ISRO space scientists still thought it was okay because the satellite was still functioning. So instead of lasting for its full 7 years that they thought it would last, it may have only lasted about a year or so. And the games were just about 8-9 months away, so they thought we would be okay. However, something else happened in September of 1982. The moon's movement interfered with the satellite's functioning. Its transponders completely heated up and the satellite stopped functioning. Pramod Kale, who was the project director for Insat 1A, in fact, he says in one of his interviews, there was nothing I could do. I remember that on September 6, 1982, all I could do was just to stare at the blank screens and turn off the 3 switches that was connecting our Earth station with Insat 1A. But now, Indira Gandhi had another problem. She had promised the nation that we were all going to be seeing Asian Games on color television. What were we going to do now that Insat 1A had failed? Which is when she dialed an old friend, the Soviet Union, and Moscow immediately came to India's help. They reoriented one of their satellites for the duration of the Asian Games and broadcast all the games from Delhi stadiums to the rest of Asia.
समय गंगा की धारा की तरह बहता चला जाता है। 31 वर्षों के अंतराल के बाद एशियाई खेल फिर से अपने जन्म स्थान दिल्ली लौट रहे हैं। यह है राजधानी का जवाहरलाल नेहरू स्टेडियम। उद्घाटन समारोह से कुछ पहले ही जीवंत ये लाल ट्रैक जिस पर आने वाले 15 दिन तक कोई 33 देशों के 4,500
What you just heard was India's only TV channel, Doordarshan, broadcasting a live coverage of the Asian Games opening ceremony in November of 1982. Thanks to this color TV broadcast of the Asian Games in 1982, India was also able to watch one of its greatest athletes in action. Her name was P.T. Usha. Now, I told all of you at the beginning of this episode that one of the highlights of my childhood was watching Jungle Book and Shaktimaan. But watching P.T. Usha take off the block like a gazelle was also a great highlight of my childhood years. While Insat 1A itself may have been a failure, our ISRO space scientists already had plans to launch subsequent satellites in the Insat series, 1B, 1C, and many more. So these satellites supported the television broadcast to a growing number of Indians who were all buying color television sets by now. Watching all of these events unfold was a Hindi movie director called Ramayan and Jungle Book. He wrote, edited and directed a Hindi television serial called the Ramayan, which was the one that brought almost all of India to a complete standstill on Sunday mornings between 9:30 and 10:30 a.m. in the year 1988.
मंगल भवन मंगल
for a lot of time so far, we've been speaking about Dr. Vikram Sarabhai and Professor Satish Dhawan. There was also a very famous ISRO space scientist who today's generation is quite familiar with, Dr. Abdul Kalam. What was the genesis of his story? We'll find that in the next episode, and I'll give you a small hint. It has a lot to do with that huge satellite launch vehicle takeoff that we see in Sriharikota. Stories for today's episode were taken from interviews of Ramanand Sagar, the director of the Ramayan show, the book, a biography of Dr. Vikram Sarabhai by Amrita Shah, and interviews of Dr. Pramod Kale, who was the project director of Insat 1A. In the course of my research, I came across two pictures. One was a picture of a stamp released by India in the year 1984. And on the side is the word PT Usha, and it has her photograph. I think it was a 30 paisa stamp. And the second is a picture completely unrelated to everything we've spoken about so far. It is a picture of India's winning team in 1983 when India won the Cricket World Cup under the captaincy of Kapil Dev. By now, Indians had begun buying color TVs, remember? So a lot of them got to see those winning strokes on the color television sets inside their homes. I'll see you soon in the next episode, which is part 6 of this series, with stories about how India finally built its own satellite launch vehicles that today take off from Sriharikota.